Recently I did a replay of Crash 4 It's About Time, and during the playthrough I jokingly referred to the game as Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Average, and the reason for that name is quite simple. While the game does a lot of good stuff, it does a lot of bad stuff, and it sort of balances out to kind of average in my opinion. The basic platform of Crash and Coco is really good, the controls are really nice and tight. It's probably the best controls in any of the Crash games I've ever played. Like, as much as I love those early games, specifically 2 and 3, controls are a little bit imprecise at points, but Crash 4 it's really good. I get the impression with Crash 4 they wanted it to be more of a precision platformer, and because of those precise tight controls it works really well and it's very fun to play. Visually the game looks quite good as well. It's clear they put a lot of effort into like the visuals and the presentation. It looks really good. It does mean that unfortunately there are some frame rate issues with the game. There's some points where there's just so many like background elements, I think that causes the frame rate to dip a little bit. I'm playing the PC version and it runs at a near perfect 60 frames a second, although the recording it looks worse, so just to be clear, it does look better when you're playing it by itself. Admittedly, my computer isn't the most up to date. I'll put my specs on the screen right now because I don't actually remember the top of my head. I think they just spent so much time on the visuals, they didn't optimize it particularly well, and I think that's proven further with like the PS4 base version and the Switch version, because the frame rates on those are like 30 frames and they dip, and it looks really bad in my opinion. I'm not a frame rate snob or anything like that, but I do appreciate a consistent frame rate, and I couldn't imagine playing the PS4 version personally, or the Switch. There are levels that you don't play as Crash and Coco, and those levels tend to be kind of bland and forgettable, you know, especially Dingo Doll. Dingo Doll's levels to me are the worst because they're just so boring. Cortex fares a little bit better, but again it's just I'd rather play as Crash and Coco, and Torna plays so similar to Crash and Coco it makes it feel like what's the point? To me the game's biggest issue is recycled content. There's just a lot of unnecessary filler. Each level has what they call an inverted mode, which I call insulting mode. Basically they take the level, they flip it horizontally, put like a nasty sort of After Effects filter on it, and you just play the level again with the same goals, the only difference being that they changed the location of the hidden gem. And I just don't understand, like, it's just transparent filler in a game that didn't need filler, to be honest. There's 24 regular levels with Crash and Coco. That's a good amount of content in my eyes. To me, 24 levels, that's fine. As I mentioned before, I did a recent playthrough and it took me about 3.5 hours to just go through all of the mandatory levels to reach the final one. I imagine a brand new person would probably take about 5 hours. And that's just doing like the baseline content. If you're like spending time doing like the relics, the box gems and that sort of stuff, you're going to spend even longer, so why they felt the need to introduce all this filler is ridiculous. What's even worse, they don't just do the inverted modes, but they also recycle certain sections of other levels as well. So there'll be levels where you play like the first half as Dingo Doll, and they play the second half as Crash in a level that you've already played before, but except they changed the box locations again. So effectively there's 4 versions of some parts of levels, which to me is just f***ing absurd. There's nothing wrong with recycling levels or reusing them. The Super Mario Galaxy games did it well with the comets, but here it just comes across as very cynical filler in a game that didn't need filler, because again there's a decent amount of content to begin with. I could have honestly done completely without the other characters and the insulting mode. I know it's a cliched expression, but quality over quantity. And the level design in this is, for the most part, really good as well. I think the level design in this game is better anyway, you know? It's not just more involved, but I just think it's more fun overall. There are maybe a couple levels that sort of drag on a little bit too much, and I would have been happy if they maybe chopped them in half and given you 2 smaller levels, but that's just me, you know? I mean, for example, there's one level called Rush Hour, which I think from the comments I've seen on YouTube videos, it tends to be a level that people hate, because you get this really long section with Dingo Doll, then you get this really long section with Torna, and it's like, why are you putting these 2 parts together? Why not just have 2 separate levels? And of course they stick the hardest part of the level right at the end so you don't get a chance to practice on it for the time trials. There are some instances where they hide boxes in really, really obnoxious places that you wouldn't really think to check. There's one level where they hide it behind some steps where it's almost impossible to see them. There's another level where they hide them in tyres, which you wouldn't really think to check. Maybe I'm being a bit cynical, but to me it feels like they hid some of those boxes really well just because they wanted to lengthen the game even more. But honestly, there was no need to do that. You have 24 generally good levels, you have the flashback tapes to expand things even more, you've also got the relics and the gems and stuff. I think if they just stuck to that core content, this game would have been great. But unfortunately they bog it down with a lot of unnecessary filler. I don't know why they did that, maybe they're wide, people would complain it's not long enough. Well, the thing is, those original games aren't particularly long anyway, so... And the fact is, all we wanted was another game in the series. There's only been, in my opinion, 4 or 5 proper games in the Crash series. You know, you also get Crash 1, 2, 3, the Wrath of Cortex, which I think is quite mediocre to be honest, and Twinsanity, which is stretching things a little bit with that one, but it is basically a regular Crash game with some twists on it. I will say one thing about the Wrath of Cortex. I kind of respect it a bit more after playing Crash 4, because as mediocre as the Wrath of Cortex is, it doesn't waste your time with like filler and nonsense. It's a mediocre game, but at least it's feel like they're respecting your time. And Crash 4, with all the unnecessary crap in it, I feel like they're not respecting your time at all. But yeah, I mean, Crash 4 is about average. I'd still stick by that name. Ultimately, you know, the whole point of review is to talk about whether or not you recommend it. I give it a light recommendation, personally. Even then, there's a few stipulations. Probably don't play the baseline PS4, the Switch versions. The frame rates in those are horrible from what I've seen. And even though I played the PC version, I'm reluctant to recommend that one because it's first of all it's on Battle.net. Unfortunately, it's not on Steam, which is so stupid because it's like, I understand that putting it on Battle.net they're going to make more money per individual sale, but they're going to make less sales overall, so they're going to make less money. And the other problem is that you have to always be online. You can bypass that. In fact, a bypass was found the day afterwards. It was cracked the day afterwards, so thank you to whoever did that. You are a miracle worker. My second stipulation is stick to the main levels. Don't play any of the inverted levels or anything like that, or any of the levels of other characters that are optional. You'll get nothing out of them, to be honest. There are unfortunately some levels that you have to play as the other characters. There's also Rush Hour, which you have to play as Dingo Dal Dentorn, and that level sucks. The rest of the levels, the other 24 levels and the flashback tapes, Crash and Coco all the way, they're fun levels. And the bosses are fine, it's not particularly memorable, but I couldn't care less about bosses in a platform game. I could do without them, to be honest. And my third stipulation is don't pay full price for it. Considering the fact that 2/3 of the game is pure filler, only buy it if it's 2/3 off. If you're on the fence about buying this game, I hope this review has helped you a little bit. You know, you might have chosen to buy it, you might chosen? If you were on the fence about buying this game or not, I hope this review has been helpful. You know, you may have chose to buy it now, you may have chose not to buy it, or you may have chose to just ignore me, which most people ignore me, so don't worry, I'm not going to be offended. But yeah, thanks for watching if you made it this far, and have a good day and stuff.